Brian Palaviron Farr here with AJW of AJW's Tap Room. How you doing,
Brian,
AJW?
how you doing, man? Good to see you.
It's Statesman's Week.
It is. My favorite week of the year.
You betcha. It's Thursday night. You love the ambiance here because we've been busy all day, of course.
We've been busy all day. It's great to be at Squaw Valley, and quite frankly, it's darn cold here.
It is, and only going to get colder.
Yeah,
I mean,
indeed.
people going up on the ridge on Saturday morning, it's going to be below freezing, and the wind chill is going to be chilly.
Yeah, it's going to be chilly. I think it's going to be a different year weather-wise than we've seen in maybe 15 years.
If not ever.
And maybe ever. Yeah.
Yeah. So, first thoughts on the race. I mean, what is Western States 2012 going to look like?
I think the big story this year, honestly, is the women's race. This is a hot women's field. Even though the weather's cold, there are 10 to 15 women runners who are going to be in this thing, I think, from start to finish. And that's a compelling story. You know, I think Ellie is a strong favorite, of course, but the group chasing her, both experienced women and, you know, new to Western States or almost new to Western States, is going to make getting a top 10 women's spot almost as tough as getting a top 10 men's spot.
Definitely. I mean, in past years, there have been some years where there's been a huge spread in the women's field.
Yeah.
For top 10.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite possible you'd have to be even on the real course this year under 19 hours. Do you think, to be top 10? What is top 10?
Well, I think the real course is going to make a big difference. I could see it going a little bit over 19, but I can't see being able to go over 20 and be in the women's top 10.
Yeah.
And 1930 is probably more like it. But you know, a lot will depend on the variables up there. We're hearing reports of wind that might affect it, especially along the ridge and so forth. But I think if I were a woman right now planning my splits and I want to be top 10, I'd be thinking low 19s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's conceivable that top 10 this year for women will be faster than the top 10 men, or should be faster than the top 10 men in 2006. Is that possible? No,
you know, that'd be a really interesting comparison to do. Since I think it was 1826 that won the men's in 2006. I mean, my 2004 got 6th place. So yeah, come on.
You did last year, yeah. This is the real course. I mean, so what, I mean, it is, I mean, we were talking earlier, it's the real course with an R and a capital R and a capital C.
With a capital R and a capital C.
How much of a difference does that make on race day?
You know, what I think it does is it raises the specter of the potential of wearing people out early. Running all the way to Robinson Flat, which we did in 10 but not in 11, and running the true ridge, Lion Ridge to Red Star Ridge, and then down and around through Duncan Canyon, is going to test people and sort of, I don't know if it'll divide the field, but it'll certainly spread the field more than the road course we've had the past couple of years. And I think that will have an impact. Truth of the matter is, last chance to the finish is the same exact course it's always been.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see, especially if the pace is hot out of the gate.
On the men's side, who does that more mountainous course favor?
Well, I mean, it's obviously unfortunate Killian is not here, because that would certainly favor Killian, giving him a chance to run that ridge and run those high mountains. I have to think that the mountains, the high ridges there on the early part, favor Mike Wolf, Nick Clark, Jez Bragg, you know, some of the favorites. Tim Olson, he's a question mark coming into the race. He raced heavily this spring. He races with a ton of heart and guts and puts it all out there. But I'd like to see Mike and Jez and Nick go after it. Ian Sharman is going to wait in the wings and come from behind.
Who's going to be the guy we don't know? Who's new to Western States?
Well, I'm intrigued by Ryan Sands. I really am. I'm intrigued by him. His multi-day race experience, his Leadville win. I'm intrigued by him. He's not been here before. We'll have to see what happens. This slew of guys who've come in through the Montreal Ultra Cup. I mean, whether it's Yuhan or Jorge Maravilla or Dylan Bowman or David Riddle or those two guys from the East, Katzman and Dixon. And I mean, there's just there's a depth there. You know, one of them are going to surprise us, but it's really, really fascinating to see the untested men in this race. And let's not forget, hello, Mike Wardian, who's probably going to win the 6K tomorrow.
Who do you think's going to win tomorrow? That's the question. There's a number of men who will actually, him and just talking Jorge Maravilla lining up for the 6K uphill challenge.
I'm really interested in seeing how this unfolds. But I think it'll be, you know, I think we'll know a lot more as they roll out of Forest Hill, both on the men's and women's side, as they roll out of Forest Hill, how whatever the conditions are in the high country impact the racers, but also how they're settling into either running their own race or doing something.
So that begs the question, say if everybody in the field, everybody who's a contender, men's and women, comes into Forest Hill together. Who wins men's and who wins women's? Who's got that closing speed?
Ellie's going to win the women's. If they're all even coming into Forest Hill. Cammie's going to be on her tail. Amy Sproston's going to be on her tail. If they're all still together at Green Gate, if I were Ellie, I'd be worried about those fast closing Flatlander runners coming after her. And there will hopefully not be a bear this year.
How about on the women's side, or how about on the men's side, excuse me, if everybody's together at Forest Hill? Who's Cal Street and the...
I like Tim Olson on Cal Street. I like Nick on Cal Street. I like the experienced guys on Cal Street. I like Mike Wolf on Cal Street. I like Jez. Well, I like Jez from the River End. I mean, the guy's a closer. Some of his splits from ALT to the finish, I think it was back when they had that battle in 09 with Sullivan and Jasper and those guys. I mean, Jez knows how to finish, and so does Tsuyoshi, by the way. If Tsuyoshi Kaburagi is in that pack, then they should be worried.
Yeah.
Not that he's, I mean, I think Tsuyoshi himself would admit he's not going to win this race, but anything can happen on race day, and in that hypothetical scenario, I'd be worried.
You wouldn't want to race after the Masters win,
absolutely.
M10.
And you know, Dave Mackey is one that I haven't mentioned yet, but Dave, these conditions are Dave Mackey conditions. If it stays cool, if he can run his race, he's been under the radar, he runs a smooth race, he's never really nailed 100. This could be the year.
I mean, besides the second or the fastest second place
time ever. Well, the fastest second place time ever. But nailed 100 win.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe this is Dave's year.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be chasing him down Cal Street either.
So, this year represents a lot of transitions. It's the first time in a long time you won't be on the starting line.
Yeah.
There's a transition toward new race director with Craig Thornley coming in the coming years. Sort of a new guard. There's a lot of just raw potential in terms of the athletes here this year. Where do you see Western States going in the next 5 years? What is the future of Western States?
Well, I'm of course disappointed not to toe the line this year. I hope to be back, and you know, God willing, I'll be able to be back. So, putting that aside, I think the next 5 years at Western States is an exciting time for the race, as much as it's an exciting time for the sport. Craig is poised to be an outstanding successor to Greg Soderland, and he's going to be great. What he and the board do with the race, how they place the event in the overall scheme of the sport, I think will require some strategic thinking. I'll be honest, I don't think the board and Western States has been very strategic in their thinking about where their race is and where they want their race to be. I am a guy who likes to think strategically, and I think they
So if you were, I mean, put yourself
if I were doing this,
What changes need? What's the change that needs to be made? What's the strategic plan?
Well, I don't think there's a specific change that needs to be made. I think there are several changes that need to be made. Number one, I think you ought to really look at the overall entry requirements to the event. I'll say again what I've said for years. I think Western States needs a 100-mile prerequisite. I know Gordy didn't have to do that when he started the thing, but a 100-mile prerequisite would bring the lottery numbers down by about a third.
So, not in the 1 year time frame, but
you have run a 100-mile race in your life.
Okay.
You can enter. That would be one. I think there's some things the race could do as far as increasing the competitive nature of the race without selling out to sponsors. But that would require really taking ownership of what the race is and what the race isn't, and not trying to be all things to all people.
Which, if we're honest, kind of has been the case.
Been the case. And we are, I'm being honest here. I think the last thing I would say is don't lose the egalitarian aspect of Western States. It is a race that should be an open, free race and an event that one aspires to do. But as with everything in life, there are limits, there are expectations that come along with the race, there are disappointments and frustrations and challenges. But Western States, if they really want to poise themselves, not so much for the next 5 years, but for the next 20 years, they need to be as concerned about perpetuating the race, which is what they do very well, with being a beacon of hope and a beacon of development for the whole sport, which, if they don't do that, other races will.
Yeah. Excellent. Well,
cheers. Bottoms up.
Don't forget to finish.
I always finish.